Hello, welcome to KinoTalk by Kyiv International Film Festival, Molodist. I'm a programmer for the festival, Bogdan Żuk, and we are organizing Visegrad Cinema Days, where we screen films from the 4 Visegrad countries, Poland, Slovakia, Czechia, and Hungary. And I'm happy that we have right now with us KATARINA TOMKOVA, a producer of 2 films that we have on our program, Servants by Ivana Strachowski and Punk's Not Dead by Juraj Švalka. Welcome, Katarina.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for, in this very challenging time, screening 2 of the films coming from Eastern Europe. It means really a lot for us.
Thank you. We're pleased that we have such a, well, I'm happy about the program, very strong films, including the 2 that you produced. And I want to start a little bit from afar, talking to you. We've met some years ago when you still worked for the Slovak Film Institute. And then you left, I think, maybe 4 years ago?
5 years ago.
5, yeah. So why did you decide to start producing films?
Oh, that's a good question. First of all, I really loved my job at the Slovak Film Institute, and I have to say it really taught me a lot. That's the place where I basically gotten to know the industry and the people around and how filmmaking works. So that was basically my film school, because I've never enrolled in a film school. But I felt that it's after 7.5 years, I think, was that I worked for the Institute, that it's time for me for a change, and I really wanted to be more involved in the process. And I would love to take credit for the brilliant idea of producing films, but actually it came as a demand from the side of the filmmakers, who came up to me and asked me to collaborate on their films, because they were feeling that they needed more of a international approach and push, and they wanted to make films that resonated outside the borders of Slovakia. So I say, what not? So that was the process. And of course, for me, I'm the type of producer that doesn't come up with ideas, but I work with directors that already come with a project. So basically, I look for talent, I look for filmmakers, and then they bring the projects that we then collaborate together with.
And you also work at Midpoint, which is the institute that supports filmmaking in Central and Eastern Europe. So I guess you had the same ideas.
Yes. Well, the director of Midpoint, Barbara Streets, actually approached me. She was looking for somebody who would start developing the training programs that were dedicated to series, because that's at the time was the new hot thing. And because Central Eastern European film schools not exactly in that depth cover serialized storytelling, and there was a huge demand from the talent from Central Eastern Europe. The young people really wanted to learn how to make series, so we developed, and basically the program grew and grew, and then we established a few other supporting programs. So now it's kind of a complex organic body of various focuses for training for filmmakers, usually coming from a feature film background, but who are looking for new formats of storytelling and would like to try out this new series, or would like to tame the new series beast.
And talking about these two films, did we have Servants and Punk's Not Dead? At what stage did you get involved with each of them, and what stimulated you to join the team and produce them?
That's actually a very good question, because it was a different path with both of them. So I came in with Punk Never Ends, or Punk is Not Dead, as is the original title. Basically at a moment where the project was already in post-production, in the editing stage. And we were looking for that version of the film that could resonate internationally, because the aim of this film was to become a festival title. Let's be honest, it's also an art house cinema film that is not meant to be attracting huge amounts of people, but is oriented or focusing on a niche audience that enjoys European art house storytelling. Yes, I mean, for me, what was the beauty of the project, or what felt very close to me, is that in the course of my still short producing career, I've been involved with the films, and this is a very typical thing in Slovak cinema, that we are working with films that are hybrids, meaning that they have some form of documentary background or backdrop, and the filmmakers then elevate them to a fictionalized narration. But because it still kind of has those documentary elements in it, I really love the authenticity that these projects bring. And there have been several of those in the course of the last, say, 15 years of Slovak cinema. If I can mention, for example, Made in Ash, or Koza was also one of those hybrid films, or a film that I also recently produced that is called Silent Days. So all of these films were basically inspired by a real character and a real environment, but implemented a fictionalized storyline into this real backdrop, and then combined it both. And for me, these stories just feel so true and so honest, and that's usually what really attracts me on them. So I in those 5 years, I managed to work on a few of those.
And Koza, for those of our viewers who don't know, is the first feature film by Ivan Ostrachowski, who directed Servants. I wanted to ask you about the cast of Punk's, yes, sorry about that. Punk's Not Dead, I remember the original title, and the international is Punk Never Ends. About the cast, it's obvious, well, I guess that a lot of the people featured in the film are not probably professional actors. So how did you find them? How did you work with them? I mean, yeah, your team.
Right.
You
Yeah. Yes. Well, it is exactly like that. In Punk, it's non-professional actors. Basically, it's people that are reenacting their everyday life. Not to say that this is exactly how it happened in their life. Of course, that there's the fictionalized storyline, but how usually these filmmakers get to these hybrid forms is that they start observing a type of reality, but it's impossible to grasp a particular moment that they want to have dramaturgically in the storyline with observation techniques, because obviously if the two guys are stealing something from another person, or the police is at their backs, you probably won't be there in a documentaristic manner. So that's where, if you want to keep the dramaturgy of the story, you have to implement this fictionalized little elements. And that's how Juraj put it together. So basically, he found these characters while researching the story, and then they were asked to reenact a version of themselves put into that fictionalized framework, I'd say.
This talking about Punk, it's I would say it's kind of a similar theme that it shows. It's very common for our region, for Central and Eastern Europe, more or less? And how is it perceived in the West, if you have had that experience of, if you know?
Yes, so I think that what is appealing about this film is that it's not pretending, that it's very honest, and I really think that the title embraces the actual meaning or the theme of the film. It's the punk way of life, the no excuse way of life, the living at the very edge and kind of tasting the very thin line or the balance between life and not life. So I think that audacity that it brought was something that was appealing to international audiences, even if, of course, as you said, this is something, a story that would be rather described as a typical Eastern European story, because of course it is telling a story that comes from a socially marginalized community, or people with not easy lives at all. But I think that the punkness is actually something that spoke internationally.
And it's kind of surprising, although maybe you just presume from the title. There would be a spoiler alert that the main character actually survives through all of this. But I'm just thinking, sorry, I kind of got lost in my thoughts, but okay, maybe
they are dealing with things that are basically, I think, neither I nor you can imagine dealing with in your everyday life. But I think that we call it that they have, it's probably not the expression in English, but we say that if you live in an environment where terrible things are, you're really living on the edge of life, that it gives you thick skin. And I think that that is what the characters are actually doing, because if they give up to what their fate is in the story, then they won't survive. So they really have to develop and fight. And it's a very rough film on one hand, for certain.
Let's go to Servants. It's a very extremely striking, beautiful visually, just impeccable. I'm jealous actually about those people who will see it on a big screen. But part of those is part of the imagery is the locations. And was it difficult to find these? Did it take a long time?
The locations, well, it was a continuous process, and it was not only connected to the development process when the script was written, but a lot of that, basically the locations were researched through the whole time of writing the script. So basically, Ivan really, of course, scouted with his cinematographer, Juraj Chlpík, and then he brought very particular locations into the script. So it was a process that happened at the same time. It wasn't really that difficult to find them, because it was easier to find the religious locations, or the ones that are the seminary or the churches, because those are the ones that do not change in 100, 200 years. So they look very much the same as they were looking in the 80s. And also they bring this feeling of timelessness. So you're actually not sure, especially in the black and white, you're really not sure what era you are in when you're watching specifically the locations of the seminary. Actually, the location of the seminary, the one that in the film looks like one building, that was shot in 3 different locations. 2 in Slovakia, 1 in Czech Republic. So it was put together. It's not one building that we shot everything in. And the street, the exteriors in front of the building was another location. So then 4. But it was much more difficult to find locations for the buildings of flats that the boys sometimes go when they go out of the seminary, because as you can imagine, they were built actually in the late 70s and early 80s, so they were brand new at that era, but none of them really look like that, now. So we really had to find places that were still more or less intact and looked at least similar to how they looked in the 80s. Of course, there was some visual effects connected to that because a lot of surveillance cameras or graffitis had to be taken out. And it was a big discussion between Ivan and his DOP on how to shoot those locations to kind of give them the most of the 80s feel that we can get out of the film. I hope that we succeeded and it really looks like an exterior from the 80s, but that was the biggest challenge. And we basically traveled around Slovakia, Czech Republic, I think even Poland, to look at those places because they look very similar in the whole Central European context. So that was the longest search for sure.
Yeah, and they look sort of timeless in a way, but also there's some sort of feeling of a decay in those buildings, in the seminary especially, which contributes to the environment of the film. And I love these contrasts of the young boys who are young and smart and full of energy, and then they get into this seminary that sort of presses on them and confines them, and also and the people, I mean the priest and their professors, there's that contrast. And I'm wondering, I mean, all of the environment, the actors, the imagery contributed to this opposition of the system, maybe of the government coming down on them and confining them. So I'm just curious how you managed to achieve this.
Yes. Well, this was a decision that actually Ivan took with him from making Koza too. And it was still based, though we worked with, for example, the very acclaimed and super talented actor Vlad Ivanov, who is a Romanian actor. The two main characters are still non-professional actors because they were 18-year-old boys when we started shooting, or basically when we cast them, they were 17. So of course, when you're directing non-professional actors, you're standing in front of a decision how to kind of get that emotionality or the kind of emotional power of the scene via either the actors, or you really focus or kind of make the interiors or the location or the mise en scène, you make it another character. And this was a decision that Ivan made because he really, really knew that the two non-professional actors, specifically in scenes where they need to deliver a big emotional performance, he really wanted to help them out and support them with also bringing in the mise en scène as a part of that emotional impact. So, and this is exactly how he was approaching also Koza. A lot of what was in Koza, or the emotion that the main character Koza was supposed to feel, was reflected in the landscape, or how the camera was working with him as a character. And this actually really also influenced the way or the decision to go black and white and 4:3 ratio, because they really wanted to kind of, exactly as you're saying, like close down kind of the visual area to kind of make the audience really feel locked down, exactly as you said, as the two main characters are. But also, if you think about sacral buildings and locations, they're very vertical. So that if you are to put that into a 16:9 ratio, you have to kind of zoom out, and it wouldn't be possible really to look closer into. This is exactly a feeling that we wanted to deliver. So in that regard, we decided to go 4:3, though of course, if you're pitching a film that is a black and white 4:3 film, it's the hardest sell ever, especially with distributors and broadcasters. But I think that because there was a very precise reason for that, also for the black and white, which was supposed to kind of describe the bleakness of the era, or the black and whiteness of the era, or even the timelessness of the era, that you kind of, it could happen anytime. Is it now, or was it in the past? So this combined really, I would say it really created another character out of the locations where we were shooting.
Yeah, congratulations on both very impressive films, and I wish you, well, hopefully good distribution and a lot of audience, and we are happy to screen both films, and this is all the time that we have right now. So thank you, Katarina.
Yes, thank you, Bogdan. And once again, thank you for really doing a physical screening on the big screen in a cinema at times where I am absolutely aware that it's not easy to do. So we really, really appreciate it, and our best to the event running smoothly and with good results.
Our pleasure. So this was KinoTalk with Katarina TOMKOVA, producer of Servants and Punk Never Ends. I'm Bogdan Żuk, programmer for Młodystki International Film Festival, which organizes Visegrad Cinema Days together with the support of Visegrad Fund. I hope you enjoyed and will enjoy these films.
Thank you. Bye.